You always start every episode like, fuck. Hey, what's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode of Cryptid Warfare. I'm one of your hosts, Z Baby, with the luscious, luxurious,
luscious lips. What's going on, guys? This is Andrew. Oh, sorry, Drewski, and Cryptid Warfare and Conspiracies. Guys, we got an awesome guest on with us tonight. Kevin hooked us up with this dude. We were on his podcast, and I'm gonna give this guy a little bit of a bio since he sent it to me, so it's gonna be good stuff. All right, author Nomar Slevik has been fascinated by all things paranormal since childhood, beginning with the UFO encounter at 4 years old. That's going to be something to get into right there. All right. Because of that experience, his life's passion has been to research, investigate, write, and share extraterrestrial encounters from everyday people in the way that convoys the human element of profoundly strange encounters. Some of his works include the books Granite Skies and Otherworldly Encounters. His podcast, I Want to Believe, just entered its 7th season and covers a range of paranormal topics. And his latest book comes out of this year, UFOs Over Maine, 10th Anniversary Edition. Slevik, brother, I'm so glad to have you on, man. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much for having me on. And it was a blast to have you guys on my show. As of this recording, it's not out yet. It comes out on, let me see, get the calendar here. It comes out on the 10th. So something to look forward to hear these guys share their stories. They're being interviewed for once.
Oh, yeah, it's good. And I want to give a holler out till Kavinsky, where the weird ones are. That's our homie, too, right there. So
hey, weird. Yeah, he's a cool guy.
What up, Kevin? Oh,
Kevin.
I love Kevin.
Luscious lips, Kevin. All right.
Major game at Criticon.
That was good stuff, man. Yeah. All right. Anyways, man. Yeah, man. Let's go ahead and just get into it, dude. The floor is yours, and just let's get started on basically on how everything happened, man. On your fascination with all things paranormal since childhood, man. Like, let's start from the beginning, man. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So it really started at very early childhood. I was like 4 years old, and I was living in Fort Kent, Maine, and that's at the tip of Maine. And which means I lived right across the river from Canada. Like you could probably throw a rock across the river and hit Canada. That's how close we were.
Dude, that is cool.
Yeah. And I used to actually get my haircuts over there just because it was actually literally closer than the barber in my own town.
Wait, hold up. Did they have it in they have like a border checkpoint or anything, or could you just drive across and do it?
No, there was a border checkpoint, but it was super lax. Typically, you just kind of pull into the border thing, and my dad would roll down his window. They're like, "What are you coming here for?" I'd be like, "Oh, getting the kid a haircut," or "We're going to Zayre's," or whatever department store was open at the time. And they're like, "Okay." And then on your way back, like if we did go to a department store, they would check the trunk and stuff just to make sure we weren't buying stuff on the cheap and selling it in the U.S. or whatever. But other than that, it was pretty lax from what I remember. But I was also super young, so.
Right on, man. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so living right across from the river, my room actually faced the river and faced Canada. And I had fallen asleep one night, and a loud bang woke me up. And my eyes kind of popped open, and I was like, what the heck was that? And I'm kind of looking around for an explanation. And I start hearing soft taps at my window. Ooh. And I realize it's raindrops hitting my window. And then I see the sky light up, and I'm like, oh, a thunder and lightning storm. That must have been thunder that woke me up. So I kneel up on my bed to watch the thunder and lightning storm. And I can see that the river is all choppy and flowing really hard, and the sky is lighting up, and I'm seeing little bolts of electricity happening with the lightning. But after just a moment, there was this really significant lightning bolt. Like if I were to ask you to draw a lightning bolt, you would draw that jagged yellow line, or it kind of looks like the charging indicator on your smartphone.
Yeah.
And it had gotten stuck in a cloud. It's the only way I can describe it. And even at 4 years old, I understood that lightning only happened for a split second. But I was seeing this lightning bolt stuck in a cloud, and that's how my mind still remembers it. And there was electricity coming off of it, and there were booms associated with it. And then I'm not sure what happened. I just fell back asleep. I woke up the next morning, and I went to the bathroom, and as I'm walking back from the bathroom to my room, I can look out my window, and the lightning bolt's still there.
Oh.
Yeah, and I'm like, this is weird. So I ran downstairs to get my dad. I brought him all the way upstairs to show him. And when we got there, it was gone. And I was trying to explain to him about the thunder and lightning storm and the lightning, like being stuck in a cloud. And he was like, buddy, like it didn't even rain last night. Like, I'm not sure what you're talking about. But I must have been like really insistent because I was kind of going on and on about it. So he had to kind of like kneel down, put his hands on my shoulder, get on my level. And I was like, buddy, like it didn't rain last night. I don't know what you want me to tell you, And I'm like, okay. And, being 4 years old, the next thing happened that caught my attention and I forgot all about it,
Yeah.
So, so it wasn't a scary thing. I wasn't like, oh, that was a UFO. I just kind of went on with my life. So it was about 2 or 3 weeks later, and I'm being woken up again in the middle of the night. And this time it's my dad waking me up, and he brings me downstairs. And I can see that my mom is like shoving my sister into her like winter jacket and stuff. And to me, it's the middle of the night. Being 4 years old, I don't know if that's 9 p.m. or 3 a.m. You know what I mean? But my mom starts putting me in my coat and everything. And I'm like, what's going on? Like, oh, we're going outside. You have to see this. So my dad like scoops me up and we all walk outside. And my dad keeps telling me, buddy, look up, look up. But I'm just like freezing cold and my head's buried in his chest. And I finally take my head out and I look up and I see like this kaleidoscope of lights. And it's like greens and reds. And I realize now anyways that it was the Northern Lights. And it was the first time and the only time I'd ever seen them. And I think those two incidents happening at such a young age kind of created this core memory that weird stuff happens in the sky and I should pay attention. And it wasn't until years later, like I was a teenager and I was thinking back about that lightning bolt in the sky. And I'm pretty sure that's the first time I saw a UFO. And my mind didn't know how to make sense of it. And it saw it as a lightning bolt or something, but I'm pretty sure it's the first time I saw one. And that was the catalyst that kind of started my fascination. And since then, I've been asking everybody and their mother, have you had a paranormal experience? Have you had a UFO experience? Like, tell me about it. Tell me everything about it. So I've just been a collector of stories ever since.
Okay, man. That thing still trips me out about like the lightning bolt just froze.
Yeah, it was weird. And again, that's how my young mind perceived it. And that's how my adult mind remembers it, but if I were to like draw it for you, there would be this jagged yellow line and it would be like at an angle and there would be a circle, almost like when you see the halo around the moon or a halo around the sun, on like cloudy days or something like that. And it looked like there was a lightning bolt inside of it. So there was a circle shape to it with something bright in the middle, and that made me think like that was probably, that was some sort of UFO. It certainly wasn't a lightning bolt stuck in a cloud. That actually makes less sense than a UFO, in my opinion.
It kind of makes me wonder if anyone else in that region or area saw that as well.
Yeah, I know. And to me, it was so apparent. And it was basically like above the river between the U.S. and Canada. And there were a lot of houses, relatively speaking. It's a small, remote northern Maine town, but it is a town of, at least 5,000 people. And, that's small, but that's still a lot of eyes that can be on something, So I too wonder if there's been anything, if anybody else saw that, but I don't know.
Okay, so basically on on your research and all that and things you've been doing for years, have you correlated anything has anyone seen the same thing? Any encounters, anything like that?
Yeah, there's a lot of correlations to be made, but what do they mean? I have no idea. It's all still really confusing. And I have no problem admitting that this UFO phenomenon, like I think I told you guys when we were speaking during your interview on my podcast, that the one thing I've learned after 20 plus years doing this stuff is I only have more questions and I rarely get answers. But there are some threads that go through a lot of stories. Some of those threads are it runs in families. If I'm speaking to an experiencer, and let's just say for this conversation's sake, they're 30 years old. Well, I ask about their parents. I ask about their grandparents. If they have children, I ask about the children in regards to, are they also seeing stuff? And their first thought is like, no. And they think about it a little bit. And again, this is just in my experience, but they think about it a little bit and then like, my dad told me something. Sometimes it'll even be a week or two after I interview them. And they'll be like, my dad saw something when he was my age or whatever, So I kind of find that it runs in families. Not always, but some of the times it does. Other correlations are, people are seeing similar shapes. There was a whole rash of triangle UFO sightings, but there's been huge rashes of orange orbs, being seen. So there's lots of correlations, but what does that really mean? Does that mean that particular subset of UFO alien species is what's visiting the area a lot, during a certain set of times? I have no idea what it means, but yeah.
Well, what's kind of funny is when you stated that it's just kind of like family groups that see these stuffs. This girl we interviewed, her mother, her grandmother, so on and so forth. They've been getting abducted by aliens since as far as she can remember in her history, and they told her that it actually goes with bloodlines. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah, there may be something to it. I would never speak in absolutes because that's impossible in this field, but that certainly seems plausible. You know what I mean? I wrote a book on a gentleman. His name's Mike Stevens. It's the book Granite Skies, and he's a gentleman from New Hampshire. And since just about 3 or 4 years old, same age I was when I saw something, he's been having ongoing experiences up until this day. And I conducted several long form interviews with him, and I found out a lot of information about his, father and his mother having sightings when, before Mike was born. Mike's grandfather had an interest in UFOs. There was some stuff just outside the immediate family, cousins, nieces, nephews that had some interesting sightings as well. And it was really interesting to see all that come out through our long form conversation.
I know it's been a long time since 4, but do you remember having any dreams that stick out to you from around, I guess, or after that time that just seemed off, or like they could have been related, and that could be like a feeling that they gave you, or things you might have seen?
What the hell just happened over there?
No idea. I think it was a timer on the light.
Oh.
When you say, if you see a beam shoot through the window, just keep recording, keep going.
So that's buddy, you better get that pistol out, ready to go. All of a sudden, we see like a gray peeking through right there at the window.
That'd be nuts.
Zook, they're here.
Not the pro. That's the 3rd time this week.
So to answer your question though, dreams, or did other stuff follow up that sighting? Sort of. So 2 things happened, and one of them is still happening to this day. And I don't know if it's because of that, but I've been told by other people that a lot of people don't experience. It is a phenomenon people experience, but a lot of people don't. So at night when the lights are off, I see everything as black and white and like staticky snow, like on a TV, so it's like everything's like really pixelated, if you will, and it's black and white. And I thought that was normal until I was talking to a buddy, and I think I was in like my early 20s. I'm 46 now. So it was like, 20 years ago or over 20 years ago. And I was just talking to a buddy, not even about paranormal stuff, but I was like, how it is at night when everything's black and white, And he was like, what? I'm like, at nighttime, everything's black and white. That's not a thing, man.
So what are you
Like, what are
talking
you
about, man?
I'm like, what? So anyways, that kind of sparked that, and then I started asking around. So I was doing research for my first book, which is UFOs of Remain, and I'll get into the 10th anniversary edition in a little bit, but I was working on that book, and I wanted to explain a little bit about that phenomenon because it kind of started around 4 or 5 years old. And I was kind of putting two and two together much later in life. I'm like, I wonder if that was maybe something more happened. I don't know, with that sighting. But it feels like it started after that weird lightning bolt. So I even called my eye doctor that I was using at the time. And he's like, oh, that's neurological. It's something with your brain. That's not something with your eyes. I'm like, what? So I started doing a bunch of research on neurological issues that can manifest, and not one of them was anything about seeing things in black and white, specifically at night or with distortion to it or anything. And he was also a little bit dismissive when I asked him about it, and I thought that was kind of weird. So it kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. So I stopped seeing him after that. And the second thing that happened after that UFO encounter is I don't know if it was a dream, Z, but I would see, it would be at night, and it would be like when I went to bed. And again, I don't know if I would have fallen asleep, like if this was a dream, or I just started seeing it. But like the ceiling or whatever I was looking at, either my walls or the ceiling, would like go away and become completely black, almost like the night sky. And I could kind of see really small pinpoints of light, like there were stars way, way out there, like even smaller than how we see them now. And I would start to see them form little geometric shapes, almost like you were using an Etch-a-Sketch really fast. You know how those are all like right angles and stuff. But I would see that forming in the lights, these little points of light. And I would just sit there and watch it, and then it would eventually go wrong, and kind of like pulse almost. And then I would fall asleep or forget about it. Next thing I know, it would be morning. And that was really a childhood thing. That hasn't happened since I was maybe like 10 years old or something. And I think, again, that was a thing after seeing the lightning bolt. Yeah, I don't know what to make of it, but...
Have you ever go ahead, Z, go ahead.
like through your research stuff, I've heard of so many childhood abductions and stuff like that, but I haven't heard of parents talking about like babies and stuff like that, because most of the time, if it's like a kid under a year old, they normally sleep in the parents' room in their crib. But so that's why I wonder. I'm like, I wonder why the aliens don't really mess with baby, at least that I know of.
Yeah, in my opinion, there are some stories when you hear about, as a research anyways, when you hear about baby stories, it typically has to do with like hybrid type stories and with babies being birthed that are hybrids. But as far as like baby abductions, you don't hear that very often. But with Mike Stevens, that actually came up. So Mike was an infant when this first thing happened. And of course, his parents told him about it. He doesn't remember it. But they woke up one morning and he was blue. But he was breathing fine. He was eating fine. But he was blue. And so they freaked out. But they're like, why is he so calm? Why is he not crying? Why is he breathing okay? So they bring him to the hospital. And they run a few tests, but this was also early 80s. So, definitely a lot different types of tests than we have now. But what the doctors came up with is something simply called blue baby syndrome. And it is a thing that happens. And it can happen when the baby ingests too many nitrates or nitrites, something like that. I have all the terminology laid out in the book, and I don't 100% remember it, but it has to do with like nitrites and ingesting something. And they're saying he had too many of it, and it can turn the skin blue for a while, and then it goes away after a while.
Oh, that's a trip.
Yeah. So I did some research on the type of water in the town where Mike was living at that time in the early 80s. And there was an influx of nitrites in the town water. But at the same time, I also found research that supported hybrid babies that are blue that have been given to human parents. So it was really interesting to find these dual explanations for Mike being blue for a little period of time when he was an infant. And so I kind of presented those in the books as, well, science says this, and paranormal research says this is a possibility. So I just put them both out there and leave it up to the reader to decide. Mike doesn't know, I don't know, but here are two things that I found.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Tamara brought up whenever with her and her mother and grandmother went through these abductions and stuff like that. I don't remember exactly because it was a while back, but that she ended up having several children over prolonged period of time. And I think her first baby was like when she was 12 or so, when I remember correctly, or something. But it was a really weird pregnancy. And I was listening to a Tony Merkel podcast today where it was this woman, and she actually had all the signs that she was pregnant, and she even had, I guess she had the bump. She didn't say that, but she said she had the bump, and she went in for her I guess for a checkup with her pregnancy, and they're like, "There's no baby in there, but you're showing all the signs that you are pregnant."
Wow.
And they even went inside of her, like, a uterus and stuff like that, and like they checked out. They're like, "There's nothing in there." So I don't know what it was like for Tamara, but she said she had several kids since the age of 12, and she was able to. She met them or something through out of, I guess, more so what's the word, out of body Trent.
Or like astral
Yeah,
projection,
yeah,
maybe? Or
Yeah, astral projection. Yeah,
she met her son or something like that, and I think she said he was blue.
yeah. She
I
said
don't
it
know.
was blue.
It was a while back, but once again, but I don't know. I don't know. That stuff is very interesting. Very interesting.
yeah, it's really interesting, especially when a woman will go in and has all the signs of being pregnant, but she's not, or she's empty now. And there have been some experiencers where their doctors have noticed some sort of damage to that area where the baby was removed, some sort of scraping or something that has a residual left over that's been physically seen by their doctor, which is, I mean, that's mind blowing to me, where it was taken out with, obviously a lot of precision, but didn't leave any outward marks, but there are some marks left inside. Yeah. And so it does show evidence of something happening, it's really like, I am into all of this stuff. Doesn't mean I believe it all, but I find it fascinating. And hybrid children and star seeds and things like that's one aspect of ufology that's really hard for me to like get behind and fully believe everyone I talk to, because some people have wild claims, and then some people have when they can show medical follow-ups, where yes, this person was pregnant and now they're not. That's obviously very convincing, but I've heard some really fantastical stories. But one thing you don't hear a lot about is men who have provided their sperm to help conceive of a child, as opposed to the woman being an incubator. The man has provided, it's not just a sample, because you hear about samples all the time in abduction scenarios, but actually being utilized to impregnate an alien, I guess, female or whatever they're doing. I don't know if it's an egg scenario or what it is, and Mike thinks that was a possibility with him, that his sperm was utilized, and he has kind of like what Z was saying. It was very much like a dreamlike state where he thinks he might have met or was privy to at least view what they looked like, So really interesting. Boy, I don't know what to believe with that.
There's this documentary I watched on Netflix a couple years ago. There was a guy based out of Colorado. It was in Colorado Springs, in my old city I lived in, but he spotted a couple UFOs in the air, and he kept watching it. And then sure enough, he shined a laser at it, right? And then it kind of stopped moving. It stopped, and as he was driving home, it was just kind of just keeping up with him.
Oh wow, yeah.
Yeah, so he didn't think anything of it. But then he talked about how he got abducted, and while he was in that trance state, I guess, like missing time and all that, he went to a hypnologist. So they were going backtracking in his memory about what happened, right? Because he totally forgot about it. So this chick put him in a hypnosis, and then she got on recording, and then he was getting, I wouldn't say raped, but he was having sex with an alien.
Mm.
And then it turns out that he had a kid by this alien, and then he met it when it was born, when they abducted him. And then I think about 8 years later, it was in the middle of the night. A kid knocked on the door. He opened it. He looked, and he's like, "Buddy, where are your parents at?" And he goes, "Okay." And he just felt like this connection with this kid. It was almost like a long lost love. And the kid took off running towards this shadow, and it was a woman figure.
Wow.
And he was like looking around, like, where are you going? And all of a sudden, a bright light happened. And then he woke up laying on his floor in front of the door. And then it was morning.
Wow.
Yeah, I'm going to find that real quick. But what you guys were talking about reminded me of that.
Yeah, that's fascinating. I have some stories in my research with aliens taking sperm samples, and not that a kid was developed from it, but interesting how, like, they described the process. And in both scenarios that I can remember, there was some sort of device was placed over the penis. And, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
it was, stimulated, and, ejaculate came out. And in both scenarios, the men were embarrassed, and they felt, used and terrible about the incident. And the alien beings were very indifferent, and they're like, "You're fine. Everything's fine." Don't worry about this. You're not even going to remember this, type of thing. But very, very procedural, and obviously not sexual in nature at all.
Yeah. Oh, that I found out that guy's name I was talking about. His name is Stan Romanek.
Oh God.
And
Okay.
it said that his film was called Extraordinary, the Stan Romanek story.
Yeah.
But here was the conspiracy on it, right? He started to tell about his story, and he had physical evidence of like injections of certain metals. So they extracted him with surgery, and they had him tested at different colleges, and they're not on the periodic table
Yeah.
of what these metals are.
I'm pretty familiar with the Stan Romanek story, and in my opinion, he's been put out as a known hoaxer. I think this was a guy, because he had some pretty incredible footage.
Yeah.
And the first footage that he had was what you were talking about, when he saw the UFOs while he was driving.
That was it.
Yeah, and it was some pretty great footage, and I think it started out as a legitimate sighting.
Yeah.
And then I think he went a little bit overboard.
Too far.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Because I was reading up like his police reports.
Right. Yeah. Some bad news bears stuff.
Pornography, stuff like that.
Yeah. And and there's some people that are still believers of him, and they're like, yeah, they implanted that on his laptop, and I don't know if I buy that with this dude, because he I've seen the Extraordinary documentary, and seen a lot of interviews with him, and he seems straight up like a car salesman, a used car salesman, in a negative sense,
Yeah, it just kind of reminded me of that, because I saw that one time, and I was like, huh, that's what that reminds me of. Anyways, yeah, but
fascinating though.
Report, he pulled it off pretty good, but reading through his police report, I'm like, hey.
It's bad, because there was a lot of stuff on there. Mm-hmm. And even his wife, she wrote a follow-up book. Like, he had been, I don't know if he's still in prison. To be honest, he still might be in prison. I forget now, but he might have been quietly released as well. But anyway, his wife ended up writing a book too.
Actually, he was released in November 30th, 2020.
Oh wow. Okay. Well, there you go.
Man, I'd have
I
put him
don't.
back to prison. I'm like, 2020, what a year.
Yeah, he's like,
Horrible joke, but
put me back in there. But anyway, but yeah, all of that talk is really really interesting. But I don't know how much of it I buy. But that's I'm also like a believer of victims. You know what I mean? I don't immediately dismiss a victim. Like if somebody is courageous enough to like come forward and want to share their story with me, the least I can do is give them kindness and a non-judgmental ear. And it doesn't matter my belief on the subject. And if they're cool with it and I think the story's fascinating, then I'll ask them if I can share it to other people.
Yeah.
And for me, that's twofold. I think it's really great to document this type of stuff, to have some sort of historical record of it.
Mhm.
And B, there might be somebody else who's suffering and they're in the shadows. They don't want to come forward and they'll read this person's story and hopefully relate to it, maybe not feel so alone.
Yeah.
And I try to explain that to a lot of experiencers. If they're hesitant to come forward, I'm like, here's what it could possibly do. If that strikes a chord with you, then let's do it. But if not, that's okay too. I never force anybody to, let me share their story. It's always up to them. A little side tangent there.
Oh yeah, 100%, man. Same thing with us. When people have cryptid encounters or anything like that, like, hey, we're just here as an outlet for you guys. If you guys want to talk about it, it's cool. If you want to be on the podcast, it's cool.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's up to you.
Yeah.
No pressure.
I've had I think there's actually a little bit more, but there's two major cryptid sightings I've had in my life.
Mhm.
One was a lot of years ago, and it's a little bit longer, so I'll tell the shorter one first. This actually goes back to 2020 as well.
Okay.
But it was February of 2020, so it was before everything crazy went down. But I was driving home. It was just before 6 o'clock at night. And in Maine, in February, 6 o'clock at night is basically midnight. It's, super dark out. So I'm driving along, and I don't know, about 300 yards up ahead of me on the side of the road is some sort of 5 to 6 foot tall thing. It's lanky. It's pitch black. It's oily black, like it's shiny. It almost looks like one of those beetles, or like it was drenched in oil or something.
Yeah.
It was just that black and that kind of shiny when my headlights hit it. And it almost looked like it was a thing made of sticks, like all these sticks intertwined for its legs and torso and arms. And it even like shot up straight from its head, almost like Groot,
Yeah.
from Marvel. It really reminded me of Groot, but like a shorter Groot, because it was 5 or 6 feet tall. And I'm coming down the road going about 45 miles an hour, and 300 yards going 45 miles an hour. I'm coming up on the thing pretty quick, but it's on the left side of the road. I'm driving on the right side of the road, and there are ditches on either side of the road. And I see this thing take an exaggerated long step over the ditch and then walk into the woods.
Mm.
I come up to the spot where it walked into the woods pretty quickly. I'm on a back road in my town. It's dead. So I stop the car in the middle of the road and I roll down my window because the wood floor is covered in snow. And so I'll hear it crunching, walking if it's still walking. So I roll down my window and I don't hear anything. But like a second later, this rotting egg smell filled the car.
Yeah.
I've read about that with Bigfoot encounters, even some black-eyed kid stuff, obviously some demon stuff, but I've never experienced it myself. And it was so bad. February, Maine is cold as hell. So I had to roll down all 4 windows for the rest of my ride home because it stunk so bad. I went back to the spot the next day as best that I could judge it where I was. I know the road pretty well, so I was pretty sure I was in the right area. I didn't see any footprints or anything like that. And I was like, geez, Louise, I have no idea what this thing was. So I did a little bit of research of that area. I've never really researched my own town before,
Yeah.
So it turns out there was a UFO encounter there in 1995, like right in the same vicinity. The closest house to that area is basically where this UFO thing happened. And this family, they were kind of like chilling. It was, like an early evening, like 8 p.m. And they saw like this spotlight outside in their backyard. And they're like, what's that? Because they don't have like an outside light or anything, like a sensor one. Yeah. So they all go outside and they look up and they see a UFO about, 300 feet in the air. That's what they say. And it had a spotlight or something on that was touching the ground. But as they came out and looked up, it shut off the light and took off. And that was their experience basically. But I thought that was interesting. The same area, very close to where I saw that thing. And then I told my mom about the incident. And she's like, your dad saw something right around that same area. I'm like, shut up. No, he didn't. My dad is a huge skeptic. Okay.
Yeah.
And God bless him for supporting the crazy stuff that I am into.
Yeah.
He's very supportive. He's even edited some of my books. He's a teacher by trade, and so he's very supportive. And he'll be like, "Wow, really? That happened?" And just like 30 minutes away, I'm like, "Yeah, that's what the person said." But anyway, so he and my mom were taking a walk down that road early one morning. Like they get up super early, so it was like 4:30 in the morning, pitch black out. And they're going by this house. I don't know if it's the UFO house, but it's in that same vicinity. And this was 2 years before my sighting of the creature. And they have like a little shed on their property, kind of in front and to the side of their house. And then their house is kind of set back a little bit. And this shed is probably 9-10 feet tall. And my dad said he saw this white figure without legs or a head hovering near the shed, and then it went behind the shed. And he was able to estimate its height because the top of this thing that didn't have a head was the top of the shed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And then after that thing went away, something else caught his eye. And so he looks, and it was at the house, and they had this big bay window in the front of their house. And he could see this shadow figure kind of darting around the house. And he knew it wasn't like a person walking around. It wasn't normal movement. It's very odd.
Yeah.
And it was again in that same area. So I don't know if that little area is cursed, if it's a tiny little triangle there or portals there or something. I don't know. It's really interesting spot. But that was the first the second creature I saw. The first one, I was living in Portland, Maine, which is like down towards the bottom part of Maine, just like the opposite of Fort Kent, and one of the more populated areas of Maine. And this was in the mid-aughts. Geez, maybe like 2002 or something actually. But anyways, I wake up in the middle of the night, and I'm just to get up to use the bathroom. And you would walk out of my room into the living room and then into the kitchen, and it was a step down into the kitchen, and then there's two windows that are right off that are in the kitchen. And when you're in the living room, you can actually look into the kitchen and look out the window. So I'm half asleep. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, and I'm walking out of my room. I walk into the living room, and I'm just about to take a step down into the kitchen. I have my foot up to take a step down, and just instinctually you just kind of look out the window. That's just where your eye lays. And I saw a crouched humanoid sitting on the edge of the awning, the little roof awning, because we were on the second floor. Sorry, we're in an apartment building. I was on the second floor, and there was a roof awning. There's a porch right below the roof awning, and then there's the ground. And there was this humanoid figure crouched right on the edge of that roof awning, back to me, so they're facing away from me.
Yeah.
And I froze. I was frozen with fear. I was like, who is on my roof? This is ridiculous. And it was just a black silhouette. That's all I could see. But I could see that there was no hair. Everything looked smooth, And I was, sleepy and couldn't really hold my weight. And my foot that was up lands down into the kitchen. Like I took a step involuntarily down. And when I did this, its head tilted up
Like it heard you.
Yeah, like it heard me. So it stood up super fast. It like, poof, stood up super fast. And then wings flapped out from its side. And it smacked like a catcher catching a fastball pitch. It was like, phew, and these wings went phew, just out like that. And again, all black. It didn't look like it was feathers. It was almost bat wing-ish. And it just did this almost like a fall. Boom. And then
Glided up.
Yeah, glided up out of the area and went out of sight. And I was like, am I dreaming? Like, it freaked me out so bad. I went back to bed. I didn't even go to the bathroom. I was scared out of my mind. So I finally get back to sleep. I wake up a lot later than usual because I just couldn't get back to sleep with this thing. But as soon as I get up, I went outside to see if there was any sort of weird footprints, like in the dirt around the porch. I didn't see anything. I didn't see anything at all. But it was so friggin' weird. And it was one of the few times I was like super scared of an encounter, you know? I don't know what the hell it was.
How tall was that creature, you think?
That seemed human size, like, 5 or 6 feet tall,
Any reflective eyes? Or
I only saw the back of it.
You saw the back of it.
Yeah. Oh. It was facing away from me the whole time. When it went like this, like it heard me, there was a little bump or protuberance of some sort that kind of indicated to me it was an ear, but it's not like it looked like this weird gargoyle or elf ear or anything, you know what I mean? It just seemed normal, but when it stood, it's like, in my opinion, it stood inhumanly fast. It was like, it was crouch and then up.
Yeah.
And then that wing smack, it just came out, and it just felt like such precision, and it sounded like, just a smack. It was crazy.
Did you happen to look at, let's see, I guess like the back, the feet, hands, claws, anything like that?
Didn't see anything like that. I just saw the legs, arms, head, and wings, and, the shoulders and stuff. But I couldn't even tell it had wings when it was crouched down.
Yeah, it was like so sucked in.
Yeah. It was weird. And to me, my memory of it is that it almost like what a shadow person looks like, but in 3D, you know what I mean? It was just all smooth and like a shadow with wings. It was so freaking weird. And that's when I started getting into Mothman, because I immediately started searching like winged humanoid creatures. And I was like, oh, there's this thing that people see? Holy crap, this is crazy. And so that got me into the whole Mothman lore and, researching that stuff.
Where was this at again?
Portland, Maine.
Portland, Maine. Okay, well, I'm gonna try to do some digging. Going back to your first one, I was actually digging through some notes and stuff I got on certain cryptids. What you're talking about is, they actually call it like the Black Stick Man. It is a enigmatic entity that is one more of like a fairly recent cryptid sightings. However, they are linked to ancient beings depicted on some cave drawings. They actually got some cave drawings of this creature.
Oh, wow.
And which some groups believe the signs of ancient aliens or extraterrestrial dimensional travelers. That's basically what they're known for. They just travel in and out of dimensions. Yeah,
that's interesting. And no doubt this thing looked weird and like it didn't belong.
Yeah, and that's basically what you described is what they're describing too. Almost like a oily, twisted like limbs. Yeah.
Weird. Wow. The winged creature, since that really got me into Mothman and all that stuff, I ended up finding a gentleman. Boy, it was probably a decade later, but that's how long I was doing research on all that stuff.
Yeah.
Or, had been. And I found a guy in a town that's like 45 minutes away from me that had some sort of winged cryptid creature sighting himself. And it was a lot different than mine. And also different from Mothman as well, but it was a weird flying cryptid creature. So that was really great to get his whole story and interview him. So that's in the book as well.
Yeah.
I've written down several questions, and at this point they might be a little out of order.
It's okay. Fire away.
I'll back up. Well, let me ask this one first. But in any of these places, and I'm going to actually add both of these together, even though they can be two separate questions. But in both these places, have there been any underground bases that you've researched that you might know of? And also, has there been any occult activity in these areas?
Underground bases, like definitely not. There was, I don't think there's any of that stuff in Maine. There are some like underground tunnels and some things like that, but nothing like military related in Maine, at least that I know of. And what was the other part of that question? I'm sorry. Oh, the occult stuff.
Mhm.
Yeah. There's been like occult stuff, really like anywhere else, like all over the state, different areas, to varying degrees, as well. But have I heard of them conjuring anything? No, it's usually a group of people getting together type of thing. But
Okay.
yeah.
And oh yeah, here's another question. This will be a little bit back. I think you briefly mentioned maybe a chimera, an alien. So like, have you come across any sort of like alien chimera type of hybrid? Because I know the government like makes hybrids. Um,
Boy, that's a good question. I'm not sure, and I could have. I have a lot of different descriptions of species, if you will, and I don't know if I subscribe to like what's the known species of aliens, because no one truly knows that. You know what I mean? In
Yeah.
my opinion, but I have people that I've interviewed have described all sorts of different types of aliens to me. So a common one is like a gray alien, but what's more common is how uncommon all of them typically are that I get. I actually don't get a lot of people having the same types of encounters with the same types of beings. Like, for example, in two towns that are very close to each other, one person experienced hooded entities with no face,
Okay.
and they were pretty tall, and they seemed to glide. And then just a half hour away, this elderly woman, she was actually 92 when she had like her first encounter, and she said that there were these really really tall beings, like maybe 9 or 10 feet, but she perceived them as like doctors, and they were very tall and lanky and didn't wear robes, but had some sort of classy sort of jacket or something on that to her said that they were like doctors of some sorts. And they like picked her up, and she recalled just being floated across her living room and then through the door without it being opened. And then she was brought to what she described as basically a party bus. There were all these other people there, and everybody was like pretty excited because they knew like a cool trip was coming up. And so she was kind of like getting excited too, looking around. This is a 92-year-old woman.
Yeah.
And she doesn't remember the trip. All she remembers is being brought back into the bed and placed back down. They're like, you're okay, you're fine,
Wow.
Interesting story. Yeah. And she ended up living for like another 11 years. She died at like 103 or something.
Oh man.
And yeah, and shared that story. But anyways, that's just, two towns that are fairly close together, but two really different descriptions of types of aliens, which doesn't really answer your questions, but it kind of just shows the gamut of species, if you will, or what people are experiencing can be different from person to person,
Yeah.
yeah, and in the realm of what we cover, like there isn't really a right or wrong answer. But most of the time, it's like it's so broad.
Sure.
You have
Yeah.
to be
And
beyond descriptive.
yeah. And it can be ultimately frustrating, but like insanely fascinating, at the same time. Like, am I going to find an answer? No, but God, tell me more. Like I need to know more.
Oh yeah,
So,
man. And that's the thing too, is that we just, as researchers and stuff, we just collect everything we have and just
Yeah.
try to put the puzzle pieces together as best we can.
Yeah.
You know.
I mean, that's all we can do. We even have some Dogman sightings that happened here, and really fascinating, where they were like in a pack, and they kind of terrorized a family for an evening. And at one point, this family was upstairs. They had locked all the doors and everything. and they kept hearing like bangs and stuff. And it was either these creatures didn't know how doors or windows work, like that they could smash through them, because they kind of made sure to bang on walls and not windows, and they obviously didn't know how to turn doorknobs or how to like bust in through a door. They were just kind of like banging and scratching and stuff. Like it was either to scare them or they didn't know how that stuff worked, and they just couldn't figure out how to get inside. But at one point they were upstairs and they were looking out the window, and the pack had kind of gathered where they knew the family was upstairs, and they were down in the yard and they were all looking up at them. And they saw one that looked like, they couldn't tell if it was like if it was two of them like having sex with each other, or why they looked like they were really close together. But they finally figured out that it was probably a juvenile was holding on to its mother and looking out, because it appeared quite a bit smaller than the other. And that was their take on it, which is really interesting. And they ended up like calling the police. The police like, call the game wardens, like what? So they do. And the game wardens weren't as dismissive, almost like, we know what you're talking about, we're not coming over.
Yeah.
They're like, lock your door if you have a gun, good. And what sucked about this situation is that they kind of just moved into this place, and the wife wasn't the biggest fan of having guns in the house, so he kept them in the shed that was like next to the house, but they were outside and he couldn't get to them.
That was,
so that,
yeah.
So that kind of sucked for him, or for them. But anyway, come morning, they were gone, and they went outside to look around, and there were footprints everywhere, and there were scratches where no human thing could reach, because they thought most of these creatures were about 7 foot tall. I think there was about 5 of them. I think that juvenile would make a 6th one, but
yeah,
fascinating story.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. That was really, really crazy about Dogman. Is one of our good friends, Valente. He has a team that goes hunts these things, and he's told us a little bit about certain operations he's been on, but he works for the government. But anyways, they call him like a critter hitter is what it is. So
okay.
Yeah, but yeah, just like the certain things he's told us about, how to kill them, certain things to do with them. When it comes to houses, he said, if they want to get in, they will get in. But the thing about Dogmen is that they're very vengeful. So the smartest thing that family did was that they didn't shoot at him, they didn't attack him, they just held out and just waited till the morning. So they were just Dogmen were just tinkering around with the house. But if they really wanted to get in and kill these people, they could have done it, man.
Yeah,
that's what's scary about it.
Yeah, that's wild. Wow. Really interesting.
On another note, since your bread and butter is UFOs and stuff, have you dealt with anybody from MUFON?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's we had a state director for quite a while. Her name was or is Valerie Schultz, and she actually wrote the foreword to one of my books. I was never a part of MUFON myself. I have some issues with their leadership.
Yeah.
Above the field investigators and above the state directors, their national leadership.
Yeah. Politics and crap.
Yeah. So that's not my favorite thing. So I don't like to associate with MUFON, but I will work with their field investigators and their directors. So this director and I had a really great relationship, and she shared a lot of stories with me that she allowed me to put in my book with MUFON permission, which was great. And I went to as many MUFON meetings that she held as possible, and I would help out and do some presentations sometimes and share some stories I uncovered and all that cool stuff. So that was fun to work with her. There's another gentleman in the area. His name's Fred Richards, and he works for a different part of MUFON. He was a field investigator for a while. He then became the director for a while, but now he's moved into one of their investigative teams. I forget the actual acronym for it. I don't know if it's STAR or NRT or something.
Oh yeah, it is STAR.
STAR, yeah. So it's more specialized, and that's what he does. And he's an amazing dude, super nice guy, all that good stuff. But yeah, I've had really good experience with local MUFON folks. Yeah.
Z, you up?
Speaking of MUFON and stuff like that, I'm going to ask this one question because it's going to lead into an experience that I just realized. I think might have been after the podcast episode you interviewed us on. I think it was like the night after or the night of.
Oh wow.
But have you heard about anybody saying in the name of Jesus whenever they see these entities?
There have been some folks that are religious who have had these experiences, and we're having issues wrapping their minds around it, and maybe thought it was more demonic than extraterrestrial. And in my opinion, it really all depends on the lens that you're looking through. With all of this stuff, my bread and butter is UFOs. You guys are cryptids. I know a ton of paranormal investigators that do, hauntings and things like that. And we all tend to look through these experiences with that lens that we specialize in. And what I try to do as much as possible, I'm certainly guilty of being biased, but I try to be more generalized and try to see things for what they are. And I have no problem telling somebody like, okay, I get that you feel like it's a demon. In my head, I'm like, I'm not going to go against what your belief system is, but in my experience, here's what I think it is. And you can take that and you can run with it, or you don't have to, so.
Yeah.
And I haven't had much negativity with that because I'm allowed to believe what I believe and they're allowed to believe what, they want to believe. So it's all good. I'm just there to help and be non-judgmental,
Yeah.
But somebody taking Jesus's name in an exclamation about a sighting, I don't know. I don't know if that's happened.
Yeah, I think I need the reason why Zick was talking about that, because I did a lot of research. I kind of went to like this alien kick for a while.
Mm-hmm.
I was kind of burnt out of cryptid, so I was kind of move on to something else. So
sure.
But I started on this alien stuff and going down that rabbit hole. And you ever heard of the CE4 project?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. I guess I forgot his name, but this guy worked for MUFON for a while, and then he did a lot of investigations and stuff. And so he was just talking about that certain thing too. So when it comes to Jesus and all that, and I thought it was pretty interesting, but also too, you can kind of like, I guess you can kind of like parallel that on the side of that too. When it comes to cryptids, people have used like the name of Jesus, like say if there was a Bigfoot, and there's this story I read out of California. This older lady, she was going on a hike, and there was this rogue Bigfoot that came to try to bluff charge her, and she said, "In the name of Jesus, get away from me now." And the Bigfoot just stops, straightens up, turns around, and walks away.
Wow.
So, but anyways, I find those things interesting. So when it comes to paranormal, UFOlogy, cryptids and stuff.
Yeah, that is interesting. Yeah, I don't think I have a story when someone has shared, like using that as protection or something. I haven't heard of that. It's got to be out there, but I haven't. Yeah. Interesting. Huh.
Yeah, it's so wild. Like the more you dig into this stuff, like you're like, wow, I barely skim the surface. There's the whole ocean. And speaking of ocean, wow, what a segue. Have you heard of underwater aliens and also civilizations
and underwater bases?
Yeah, because, dude, sure. I have seen that. No, this to me, since I used to do video editing and crap like that, and
crap, yeah,
stuff. Yeah, it's like, thanks, man. Yeah, like I just pay attention to all sorts of details in the image, making sure the lighting's good, and I'll adjust like just the hue and the saturation and stuff like that, just to make sure that all lines up. And I'm like, wow, that looks like legit footage of an alien, well, not alien. I don't know if it's alien, but spacecraft going in and out of the water, and at freaking crazy speed.
Yeah.
And like,
yeah, there's been some interesting footage that Jeremy Corbell has, released with supposed UFOs coming in and out of water. But yeah, I've certainly have heard of civilizations. I've heard of underwater sightings. There have been some in my state. Some people were traveling home, and they were going over a bridge, and they saw this UFO. They didn't see it come out of the water, but it was below the bridge and went, was accelerating and ascending above the bridge, and they saw water dripping from it, and there was kelp hanging off of it. And they're like, "Oh, that must have been underwater. Like, that's wild," And then it, took off and kept going. There's another story of a gentleman who, his parents lived right on like the water in a marina type area, and he was outside having breakfast on a balcony. And this was like a summer day, and he's just kind of like chilling and eating his breakfast. And this was the days before like cell phones and stuff, so he's just kind of like looking out on the water and stuff, and looking down and eating his food. And while he's looking down and eating, he hears like this big splash. He's like, "What the hell is that?" So he kind of like looks over at the water, and he's expecting to see something, but he instead sees like this column of water going up. He's like, "What?" And so he follows the column of water going up, and there's this silver ball in the sky, and water's pouring off of it. And he's like, "Oh, this thing came out of the water, and all this water is rushing off of it." And he watched that for a second, and then it took off. But those are just some examples like locally here. But even in like Lake Baikal, in Russia, and there's these Russian divers were, I think, on a training exercise. This is back in the 70s.
Yeah.
And they said they came across these like 10-foot tall aliens that were kind of like had scuba gear on, and just they were like, "What the hell are these things?" And they encountered them, and they went really deep. And
that's Scuba Steve. Yeah. Okay. Going on that, what do you think about the Miami deal at the mall?
Oh, well, not a whole lot. I've seen a lot of footage, and I've seen a lot of blurry footage. And what I've seen is a top view down. And to me, it looks like a group of individuals are being mistaken as one thing, because there's nothing clear in any of the footage that I've seen. If you've seen something different, dang, like shoot it my way. But yeah, I don't hold a lot of weight for the Miami stuff. I think it got blown out of proportion, but that's just been on what I've observed, and that's the conclusion I came. But if you got something different, like hit me up, let me know.
Have you seen the? Because after that, there was a lot of people going on TikTok that were there stating like basically like the same thing, how they saw these 10-foot humanoids in there. But it's kind of funny that the police didn't release that until like 6 days later. It's weird.
The police released that the footage of the people saying that.
No. The people who were there released it like the next day or like an hour later or whatever, but no one really didn't think of anything. And then it all added up together when like the news and the police reports came out like 5 to 6 days later. And then all that started popping up.
Gotcha. I guess, I don't know, like we all have our phones on us all the time.
Yeah.
I don't know, seeing 10-foot tall aliens like in a crowded area in Miami, I really feel like somebody would have caught it on their cell phone somewhere. And if that footage exists and I don't, and I'm ignorant to it, my bad, but it really feels like somebody would have caught it, and something semi-clear.
Yeah, the part that was tripping me out was that where's the CCTV footage? And not only that, at the same time, being prior law enforcement, they sent everybody there, like over like 65 officers, 65 cruisers, and they shut down the airport. I was pretty close to it, like no flyover traffic, no nothing, except for the military. That's it.
All right. That's weird.
That was a trip, yeah.
Yeah,
there's a lot of things ain't adding up.
Yeah, the amount of police, that's overkill for what they said it was.
Yeah.
And shutting down of the airport and no flyover is also super weird. So yeah, I can get that. Also, are you guys familiar with Lon Strickler at all?
Lon Strickler sounds familiar.
Yeah.
He did an astral projection, remote viewing.
Yeah,
session. Yeah, he did a remote viewing session, I think with 2 other people, for the Miami thing.
Yes.
And they came up with some interesting stuff. I don't know where my beliefs lie with remote viewing. I haven't like looked into it a whole lot,
Yeah.
but it was really interesting, like what they came up with, and I didn't know what to think of that. But the actual
What did they say?
facts, there was some alien stuff. Boy, I read it a little while ago now. I don't remember it all, but I can send you the link.
Yeah.
So we can like, I can refresh myself, and then, but they were like believers of the situation after they did the remote viewing. You know, they were skeptical, and then they did the remote viewing and became believers of what went down there. But to know what you're saying with the overkill of police presence and the no flyover airport shutdown, that's really interesting. So I like to look more into that.
Yeah, I would too. Oh, what's funny is remote viewing. I call it astral projection. It's all the same thing, but like
Okay.
the military does it,
Yeah.
and like the government 3-letter agencies do it too to get like a recon on a certain op they're going to do. But
Yeah.
one of the cryptid hunts we went on, one of the ladies that came to meet us there, she does remote viewing, and the things that she called out, like I say about 80% of it we actually ran into
Wow.
over there, and it's kind of like, what?
That's
You
a
know?
huge number. Wow. Yeah, that's
So-
really cool. And you know, for Lon and those guys, they've been doing it for like decades. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they're not new to it, so they know what they're doing. You know, so definitely gave me pause. I was like, "Huh, that's interesting." You know, but to hear like, because I knew about the police presence, I didn't know the exact number of like 65. That's a lot.
It was a lot.
But to know that the airport was shut down and only military could fly over, that really gives me pause. So yeah, I think I'll have to check that out a little bit now.
Yeah, definitely for sure. And then, and not only that, what was a trip to when it comes like active shooters and stuff like that? Like not like the majority of police can get there, but some of them could be tied up.
Yeah.
But they strictly said that everybody from that precinct went there, and yeah, I thought that was pretty interesting. I was like,
Yeah. Yeah. Like literally some were like had people in custody or like had someone pulled over and like, all right, get the hell out of here. I gotta go. Yo, there's 10-foot aliens. I gotta run, son.
I know, right?
That's wild, dude. Wow. Crazy stuff, man. There was that whole Las Vegas thing that I think happened. I don't know if it was 23. I think it was 22. Maybe it was 23.
Yes, I remember
But the
that.
whole, yeah, that was really interesting. And again, you know, like after not having like any footage, but then seeing some stuff that kind of didn't add up, but then, you know, and then the kid actually came out and I think he said he made it up. I think eventually, like he was pranking his mom, and his mom's the one that kind of took it too far. Like it freaked her out. She was just like a scaredy cat. I was like, oh, I see him, you know, and he just kind of went with it. I think that's the last I heard of that stuff, but it was interesting, like with the meteor that kind of flew over when that was happening.
Yeah, at the
I think
same
that was
time.
it. Yeah. I think that was like, oh, let's use that as a starting point to prank mom, you know, and then that it actually got caught on, I think, a Ring camera, and then like a police cam, you know, happened to catch it as well. You know, like it was making it too real for a lot of people, and it was really interesting. Yeah.
Dang, I didn't know that. I stopped looking into that. No, now my heartbreak is broken.
Yeah, I heard a really interesting podcast about it that really deep dove and ended up actually interviewing the kid and all this stuff. And I was like, oh, wow, this is...
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And he was like, yeah, I was just messing with my mom, and it blew out of proportion, and now people won't leave us alone. So
I want to borrow that suit.
All right.
People around here are freaking crazy. I don't know how long. Like I'll probably get shot within like 10 minutes of walking out of my house.
yep.
Okay,
I'll
now,
mow my yard in it.
what do you think about Project Bluebeam?
Dude, I was literally going to ask him that question. That's crazy.
Well, I think I don't know what to think of it. I get so like disclosure and finding out like what the government is really doing and what they really know about this stuff. Like that was a thing in my past research for me. Now it's all about like collecting stories and being there for the experiencer. So I kind of step away from all that, other than trying to keep my finger on the pulse of it. Because I do get asked by like local media when something breaks, you know, they know I'm like the state's like UFO guy. So they're like, what the hell's he got to say about it? You know what I mean? And so I like to stay aware of things, you know, but I typically have like a mundane opinion because I'm like, you know, there's actually a really cool story besides like what this is, what you're talking about, you know, like I want to share a really cool story as opposed to, you know, having some dumb quip so they could use 10 seconds of my audio, you know what I mean? But so I do have like an arm's reach to all the government stuff, even though I like to keep myself abreast of all the situations. So I guess I don't have the biggest opinion on it, but I really feel like you guys are going to tell me something insane. And now I'm going to have to spend the rest of my night researching stuff.
No, that was it, man. I just wanted to see if you knew. That was it, man. That was it. Yeah, well, Zook and I dove into that big old black rabbit hole like a couple episodes back. One of our buddies broke it all down. So, other than that, I just wanted to see, you know, if you had anything on it, though, since you're a big UFO guy. So,
nothing extra or special. You know, I spend my days knee deep in like newspapers.com and trying to set up interviews with people around the state so I can hear their story, you know, and hopefully share it on my podcast or share it in one of my books or something. You know what I mean? Yeah. I've turned into a storyteller, and, you know, I go to libraries and share these types of stories. Are you guys aware of Kevin's story with the mushroom people?
Yeah. Matter of fact, we had him on our podcast and he talked about it.
Yeah, that's sweet. I included that story in my new book. It's so fascinating, and the stuff with the Dogman as well. I included in the book because it's just such a two great stories.
If I seen mushroom people, I don't think I'd ever put mushrooms on my pizza again. Like, I can't do it, man. Can't do it.
I might need to eat those mushroom people. I don't know. I know.
Give me some butter and garlic.
I don't. The whole glasses thing. You remember that part of it, where the thing like smacked him in the head, like, you don't need those, and like he never needed glasses again. Like, that's so freaking weird.
That's a trip, huh? That's pretty cool, though. I like that.
Yeah. And, you know, I love collecting those types of little stories, you know, to be able to share with people. I have a great story from 1965, and it involved an entire class at a school.
Okay.
So this was in Waterville, Maine, which is kind of like in the middle eastern part of the state. This boy, they're in the middle of the class. The teacher is like kind of giving a lesson, and this boy is working on stuff, and he starts to hear this beeping sound. And he's like, what the hell is that? He couldn't help but focus on it. It was really like annoying him. It was making him very curious. And he could tell it's coming from outside. So he just like abandons his schoolwork and walks to the window to look outside. And he sees this black dot in the sky. And he like has an audible gasp of like what he's seen. So the whole class kind of looks over, and the teacher finally notices him at the window. And like, his name was Paul. And he's like, what are you doing, Paul? Like, get back to your seat. He's like, no, there's something in the sky outside. So all the kids get up and they go to the window, and they're watching this thing, and they can tell that the beeping is coming from this thing. Well, as it gets closer, it's not a black dot anymore, and it's getting bigger. And it turns out that it's like a silver oval shaped thing.
Okay.
And it's getting lower and lower, and it eventually goes right by the classroom windows and continues to descend, and it appears to land behind a house that's near the school.
Oh, that's a trip.
Yeah, and the teacher was there, and the teacher saw it. And so the kids are like kind of going crazy and everything. And the teacher is kind of freaking out. And she goes and gets the principal. And the principal's like, what? Okay, we got to sequester these kids. So he splits them up as much as he can. And he talks to each one individually to see what they saw. And they all described something very similar. He then had those kids draw on a chalkboard what this thing looked like. And they all drew something very similar. It was this oval shape. They said it was silver. There was this antenna looking thing sticking out of the front of it. They said the bottom of it in the center was kind of blurry and black, which is really an odd way to describe something on something solid as blurry, you know, because it was going pretty slow past the window. So he's like, this is wild. So he calls the newspaper. Excuse me. He calls the local newspaper. And he asks if anybody had reported a UFO in the area today. And they're like, that's strange. Yes. And just in the next town over, there was a railroad worker, and he was outside working on the tracks. And he heard this beeping sound, and he looked up, and he saw this little black dot fly over. He's like, well, what the hell was that? I don't know. So he goes back to work. About 2 minutes later, he hears a beeping sound again, and he sees another black dot fly over, but it's bigger than the first one. Another 2 minutes goes by. So this is happening in intervals of 2 minutes. Yeah. And each time he sees it, it's getting bigger and bigger, meaning he thinks it's closer. Lower and lower. Yeah. And so the final time this thing flies over, he described it as like the bottom of a teacup, you know, which is kind of oval, and was seeing it from a different perspective than the kids did. The kids saw it side on, and he was seeing underneath it. But that's what he reported. So the newspaper like wrote up the story. They came down to school and took pictures of the kids standing next to the chalkboard and their drawing, you know. Yeah. In that same newspaper, an article right next to the UFO article was about people in town seeing a meteor. So there was all this really quick fanfare about the UFO sighting. Then they read the meteor article, and like, that's what the kids saw. That's what the railroad worker saw. Yeah. It was nothing. Oh, and so it kind of got buried. This happened in 1965. I didn't find that story until 2023, you know, in an old newspaper article. And it's just wild, man. Yeah. Wild. You know,
go ahead. Sorry. What grade were those kids in?
I believe they were seventh graders. I think they were seventh graders.
Okay, well, that's old enough for me.
Yeah, sixth or seventh grade, something like that. But yeah, it was wild, and I really appreciate that the principal kind of like took it seriously and wanted to like, he was trying to separate the kids so they wouldn't talk to each other and like influence each other. So he did his best to do that, because it was kind of a small class. It was like, 10, 12 kids, something like that. So it wasn't the hardest thing to do, but really interesting. And it sucks that it got dismissed and then kind of buried, but I'm so glad I was able to find it and kind of dig it up and share that story, man, in the new book, you know? Really cool stuff.
Out of all the stories you gather, because I know you read through thousands, man, thousands and all that, what is the most scariest one you've ever researched on?
Scariest. Okay. Let me think about this. Are you going to do some editing to this? Because I might have to think a little bit. There are some scary ones. Oh, man. Okay. Yep. All right. So this actually wasn't that long ago. I want to say 2017. You know, I have a proof copy of the book right here. I just kind of like to get the date right. Man, I don't know if I'm going to find it. It's going to take me too long to find it. But anyways, it wasn't that long ago, within like the last like 5, 6, 7 years.
Yeah.
And this woman was on the phone with somebody, and she's in her kitchen and her dog is there. It's kind of like a summer evening. And so the door's open, but there's a screen door that's closed. And the dog is sitting there at the door staring out the screen, and it's kind of like growling a little bit and stuff, and she's like half paying attention, and she's like, what the hell's wrong with you, stop it, and the dog would like kind of like whine and look at her and stuff, and but then it would go back to what it was doing, and then it started like barking, and it was getting more and more animated, and she's like, what the, like, listen, I gotta let you go. So she gets off the phone, and she's like, what are you doing, what are you, and she sees that it's now like, look, she can tell it's looking at something outside. So she stands up, and she's looking out the door, and she sees this, lack of a better term, an alien, and it's crouched down, back facing away, but its head is turned and looking right at the dog. and they're kind of like having the stare down, and it freaks her out. She's like, oh my God. And her instinct was kind of like to put her hand on the door, but by doing so, she popped open the screen door and the dog went running after whatever this thing is. So she's like, stop, come back, come back. And this dog takes off running. So this alien thing stands up and it starts to run. And she's outside, she's watching the dog chase this alien. She's watching the alien now. And this alien, and she said it was probably like 7-8 feet tall.
Dang.
We're talking about a lot of tall aliens tonight. But this thing's like 7-8 feet tall, and it's running away from this dog. It's not making any noise or anything, but just doing like this running type of thing. And it starts to disappear from its head down.
Oh, someone starts to kind of cloak out, kind of.
Yeah. That's what she was thinking. And that freaked her out even more, that she just started screaming. And the dog, that like freaked the dog out or something, because the dog stopped running but continued to bark. And this thing just, down to the legs and then feet, and it was gone.
It's like dematerialized.
Yeah. And it just freaked her out. So she went, and her boyfriend was home, but he had no idea any of this was going on. So she ran and got him, and they went outside to look to see if there was any like trace of why this thing was there, or not why, but if there was, any footprints or anything, and they couldn't find anything. But that really, like, reading the story, it like freaked me out. Like, there's a lot of things that I'm very desensitized to, which I'm sure you guys are too, just being in it all the time, but reading that really freaked me out. It was evening, and you're kind of looking outside, and then when you see that thing, it finally like appears to you. Like, for me, I'm like really afraid of insects. It's irrational. You know what I mean? But like when there's like a bug or something on me and I finally realize it, you see it out of the corner of your, and I'm like, I was having that experience reading it. I could see her have that moment of recognition, and then fear washed over her,
Yeah.
And it was really freaky. And I was saying before, like, we're very desensitized, but like something like that, like aliens, and I feel like maybe black-eyed kids are kind of like the last frontier of the paranormal, of things that still freak me out, of things that still like scare me.
Yeah.
So I love researching alien stories, and I love sharing black-eyed kid stories on my podcast, because they're almost always wicked freaky.
Yeah.
Dude, what about like, have you heard any wide-eyed kid stories?
I have heard of white eye. I think I shared it on my last podcast, and it was essentially very similar to a black-eyed kid encounter, although this person was in a car, and I think they were like in a parking garage, and this kid, I think, approached them and was kind of doing the same thing, like, hey, like, can you give me a ride type of stuff. And when they looked at him, he had white eyes as opposed to black eyes.
I feel like from what I read and in some stories I've heard, they're kind of the leaders. I think they're a different. There's one other color. Maybe it's red eyes, but which I could be wrong on that. But I'm pretty sure there are 3 different types of eye colored kids. But it's the white ones. They're kind of like the ringleaders, and I've heard of them. Like, they don't even need permission, depending on whose house or car they're trying to get into.
Interesting. This one was definitely seeking permission in the story that I read.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I think I've yet to find a black-eyed kid story in Maine. No, I did find one. But it was fairly like innocuous. There was a weird knock at the door. Not a weird knock, but it was like late at night. You know what I mean? It was like 10, 11 o'clock at night.
Out of nowhere.
Yeah, and I don't care who you are. You live in a rural area, and there's a knock at your door at 10, 11. It's, you're super cautious. So it was a very similar thing where they were asking who it was, and they heard a kid's voice, and they're like, oh my God. Like, so they opened the door, but then the fear took over them, and they ended up shutting the door on the kid because they were too freaked out. And so there wasn't too much to the story. It's just kind of like your standard black-eyed kid story. But I always like it when I can find an example of one of these things, like from my home state, so I can share it with other people, so they know it's also happening here, I always think that's fun. But I think one of the eeriest black-eyed kid stories I heard was this cop had responded to a domestic violence call, and he kind of resolved whatever that situation was, and he went back to his vehicle, and I don't know if he was typing something up or if he was radioing back to base or whatever, but while he was there, he saw these two kids on the porch next door to where he just was, and they were like 7, 8 years old, and they were knocking on the door, and he's like, what the, this is 1 o'clock in the morning, what the hell are these kids doing out?
Yeah.
So he takes it upon himself to go up there and start talking to the kids, and he's trying to talk to them, and they just keep knocking on the door, not even bothering,
Giving them, paying them no mind.
yeah, and he's really trying to get their attention. So finally this elderly woman opens the door, and she sees this cop standing there, and he's like, ma'am, do you know these kids?
There's no
And
kids.
yeah, they're gone. And she's like, what? Is something wrong? Is everything okay? And the cop was just like, what, son?
Oh man.
Yeah, and he's like, yeah. He's like, I'm so sorry to have bothered you,
That was.
I wonder why it's interesting because, well, I mean, so many people, they have the idea about these stories only being in certain areas. I'm like, no, you would be surprised.
Yeah.
And this is where in the realm of where it gets like a little bit deeper and creepier is that like Dogman, for example. I mean, I've heard of so many stories of Dogman encounters up north, but because of just the population growth and the lack of forest where they're able to roam around in, like they're actually migrating down here to the southern states, because there's even been some seen here around Tennessee, and it's just how we have a lot of Bigfoot around here and other type of things, but it's crazy that there aren't a whole lot of BEKs seen in the deep woods. You would think there would be more stories, but apparently they love going to neighborhoods.
Yeah. That seems to be like one of the few urban stories, besides like UFO encounters, because that happens everywhere. But yeah, Black Eyed Kids seem to be kind of urban, or like at least in a populated town. You know what I mean? It's rare when it's like, oh, these kids showed up, and I live on the outskirts of town, 10 miles away from everybody. I don't have a neighbor, and that does happen. I mean, there are those stories, but it typically, like, it's really interesting when it happens like at apartment complexes, like in the hallways. So they got in the building, now they're knocking on doors, in apartment complexes, which is terrifying in and of itself.
What do you think that they do with like the ones who do let these things in, and they do, whether that's in their car or their house, like there's all that time lost?
There are some stories of people who have let them in, and in the couple of stories that I do remember where that's occurred, not a whole lot happened when the kids were in the house. There's actually one really crazy story, and I'm pretty sure it was probably made up, but I had to share it. I'll tell you that in a sec. But this other story, this couple let them in. They actually like went to like get them the phone and everything, and the wife was preparing some like hot chocolate or something for the kids, and they were just kind of standing there, and they were kind of waiting, and then they both asked to go to the bathroom, something like that. So where they left the room, and they're like, yeah, of course, go to the room. And the guy came back with a phone, and he's like, where are the kids? And like, oh, they're in the bathroom. And he goes and checks, and there's nobody in the bathroom. The kids aren't in the house anywhere. But over the course of the next several weeks, the husband develops a sickness, and I think he got diagnosed with some sort of cancer. I can't remember what the cancer was. But there was also reports of like, I think the wife or the rest of them kind of like having a cursed existence for a while. Like there was a motorcycle accident that happened afterwards. And so it was almost like they brought this doom and gloom, cursed energy, at least to this particular family, which is really interesting. But there's another crazy story where he let the black-eyed kids in. He was up late watching a movie, knock at the door, and he's like, what the hell? Like, yep, all right, let's get your parents on the phone and get you kids home. So he goes and gets the phone, and the kids are gone. And then he starts hearing noise upstairs, and he's like, what the hell? Did they go upstairs? So he goes upstairs, and he starts to hear all this noise in his wife's, or in his bedroom, and that's where his wife's currently sleeping, and he hears like some sort of kerfuffle, like there's some sort of fight happening or something, and she ends up screaming. So he like bursts into the room and finds her deceased. And the kids are gone.
Gosh.
And then he starts hearing noises in his kids' room. So he's like, oh no. So he runs into the kids' room, and he claims both kids are now deceased. And these black-eyed kids then revealed themselves to him one last time, and then they just like walked out of the house. He calls the cops. He's blamed for what's happening. I guess a trial ensues, and they didn't find him. I don't think they found him guilty of first degree or even second degree murder. It might have been manslaughter, and he was sentenced to like an institute for, I don't know if it was criminally insane or what that terminology is now.
Yeah.
But that's what he claimed, and this was all these years later, 15 years later or something, and he's finally like sharing this story, and he was able to use a computer and share that story. And so you gotta have to kind of take that with a grain of salt, but there's no way I was not sharing that story. You know what I mean?
Man, that'd be a bad day.
Yeah, and there's so much more detail to it. That was like the quick run through of it, but it was it was like a 15-minute storytelling of all the brutalness that he heard. Like he heard bones breaking and like really awful stuff.
Oh man.
Yeah. And he said it was the black-eyed kids because he let them in.
Golly, that's crazy. Like, you only got to let them in once, and then I guess that gives them a rite of passage for the most part.
So people question, are they vampiric in some way? Are they aliens? Are they demons? There's not really a consensus on what they are.
What's funny is that some of that kind of adds up the same way as like alien abductions does. Some of the cases anyway, when it comes to missing time, stuff like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you brought up missing time. I love telling this story. Can I share another UFO
Heck
story
yeah,
with you?
man.
Oh, please.
Yours, buddy.
So, this happened in the mid 90s, and there was a woman living with her family, her husband and her 2 teenage kids. And it was just about 9 o'clock at night, and the kids were downstairs and they were about to watch a movie on TV. And mom and dad were upstairs getting ready for bed, and they were actually going to lay down in bed and watch a TV show or a movie of their own. So mom's brushing her teeth, and dad's kind of like in the bedroom getting, turning down the bed and stuff like that. And she hears him go, what's that light? And she kind of sticks her head out of the bathroom. She's got a toothbrush in her mouth, and she's like, what are you talking about? He's like, there's this weird light outside, and it's not the moon. The moon's over here. So she's like, well, let me see. So she goes and looks, and sure enough, there's this big, round, bright light in the sky that looks kind of like a second moon. But there, she's not seeing any of the telltale signs that it is the moon. And sure enough, she looks over and sees the actual moon. So he's like, let's go outside and look at it. And she's like, okay. So they go downstairs, and they're heading towards the front door. So the kids are like, what the heck are you guys doing? And they're like, well, there's this light outside that we want to check out. You guys want to come see? And they're like, yeah, sure. So now all 4 of them are outside, and they're on the porch, and this light is off to the side. So they're having to like lean over the right side of the railing to look on the side of the house and see this light in the sky. While they're looking at it, a second later, the light zooms to in front of the house and descends even more. And it's kind of right in front of them, like treetop height. And they're seeing this big sphere of light, and they're all just kind of staring at it. And then after a second or two, it blinks out. Huh. So they're all kind of like, whoa, that was crazy. Well, it's getting cold. Let's get back inside. So they go back inside, and the first thing the kids notice, they're like, hey, our movie's over.
Oh, man.
And mom's like, what are you talking about? They're like, yeah, the movie's like, no, that's the end of the other movie, and your movie's going to start now. And they're like, no, because it was already a little past 9. Yeah. It should have been the start of the movie. And so she's like, no, let me go see. So she goes into the kitchen and looks at the stove that has a clock on it, and it's now after 11. So the whole family missed 2 hours of time. And to them, it was in the blink of an eye,
Oh, man. I'd yell, dang it, they got us.
And she's, because she ended up having, I wouldn't say a lifetime of encounters, but she had some pretty major encounters in her life, like maybe in like 10-year increments, if you will. And this was kind of like stuck in the middle. So she continued to have encounters, but that really like upset them because they didn't know what happened, and they didn't talk about it. It was almost like this, they all developed this trauma that was like unspoken, and
Yeah, we're just gonna suffer in silence.
yeah, and not talk about this. And she ended up like divorcing her husband not too long after that, within a few years after that, and then got a boyfriend and moved way out of town and into this other really remote area, and ended up having a really crazy encounter with her new boyfriend, which was interesting. They were walking in the woods, and he liked to collect antlers and make chandeliers and things like that out of them. So they drove to the woods. They have the dog walkie-talkies, and to cover more ground, they split up and they walk in a big, like 3 or 4 mile circumference around this wooded area. So he's off walking. She's with the dog, and she's walking, and she's walking for, I don't know, about an hour and a half, and she's like, "Where am I? This doesn't look right. I don't know what's going on. I don't know where I am." And the dog had been fine the whole time, like nothing alerted her that something was wrong. So she takes out the walkie-talkie and turns it on, and it kind of does this big, kind of
Static.
like, big static.
Frequency type. Yeah.
Yeah. And then it shut down.
Oh.
And she's like, "Oh crap, like it's dead." And she knows that like they replaced the batteries in the truck. They always put new batteries in. She's like, "Oh no." So she can't even call her boyfriend to be like, "Where am I?" So she's like, "Well, I'm going to keep walking because I'll see something that I know." So she keeps walking, and she's only walking for like another 20 minutes or so. And she sees a mountain that she recognizes. She recognizes the peak, and she's like, "Oh, that's such and such mountain. I need to go the complete opposite direction." And it's only like a half hour, 45-minute walk. And she's like, "Okay, I'm not that lost. I'm just freaking out. I'm just freaking myself out." You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So now she turns around and she starts walking back. And within like 45 minutes, she starts hearing this honking sound, like a horn honking on a car. And she's like, "What is that?" So she's getting closer and closer, and she can see that it's the boyfriend's truck. And he's inside of it, honking his horn and yelling her name. And she's like, "Hey, I'm right here." And so he like gets out of the truck like angry. He's like, where have you been?" And she's like, well, I thought I got lost, but I've only been gone for like 2 hours. And they got there at like 7:30, 8 o'clock in the morning. It was noon now. And he's like,
man.
"It's noon. Where have you've been gone for like over 4 hours." And she's like, "What?" She's like, "I got a little lost, but it should be like, 9:15, 9:30. What do you mean it's noon?" And again, nothing was out of the ordinary. She doesn't remember blacking out or anything. The dog never did anything weird, but she had like this 2.5 hours or whatever of missing time again.
It's almost like a time slip.
Yeah, a time slip. She also kind of, because I discussed that with her, but she also likened it to the missing time with her previous husband. And she was wondering if she got visited again. And she was isolated, so
that kind of makes a prime time for it.
Yeah, but she thought it was weird that she just didn't know. Like they wiped her memory real good if that happened, because all she remembers is walking, and she kind of had this odd moment of, "Wait, where am I?" Like that occurred to her all of a sudden. So was that the transition? Where it happened?
Could have been.
I don't know.
Who knows?
But yeah, really interesting stuff though.
What was funny is when you said about missing time. That's a trip though. That would suck. You're just walking, all of a sudden, where the heck am I?
Yeah.
And then you've been gone for like 4 hours. Like, oh.
Now, I'll tell you the story. I had my own. I wouldn't say it's missing time. I'd say it's like elongated time. It's really weird. And I was with.
At work.
So I was with my girlfriend at the time. I was with her son. He was like 10 years old. Yeah. And we had all gone to, you remember I was telling you I researched this local like Mothman story that happened. Well, it wasn't too far away, and it's in a really beautiful coastal town where it happened. So I asked them if like, "Hey, I'm going to go research this thing, and I got to do it at night because that's when it happened for this guy," and blah, blah, blah. I'm like, "Why don't you guys come, and we'll make like, we'll go stay at a hotel, make a couple nights out of it,
Yeah.
They're like, "Yeah, sure." So the first night, I go out by myself and all that good stuff. Second night, the kiddo was like, "Oh, can I go out with you? Can I come along?" I'm like, "Heck yeah, man, that'd be cool. Let's ask mom, make sure it's okay." So she says it's okay. We stop at the store. I get him some Sour Patch Kids. And I let him know like what I'm looking for. And he's kind of into this stuff a little bit, but he's also a bit scared of this stuff.
Yeah.
So I told him it was this Mothman-like creature. And he's like, what's Mothman? So I was like, what's the easiest way I can tell him what Mothman is? And I'm like, okay, I'm going to show him the Mothman Prophecies trailer.
Is that the one with Richard Gere?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, so I show him that trailer. And he's like, whoa, okay, so you're looking for the Mothman. I'm like, yeah. So then I tell him about the real stuff in 1966 in West Virginia.
Indrid Cold.
Yeah. So I'm telling him all this stuff. He's like, man, yeah, let's go see. Some guy saw that here. I'm like, he saw something that was really weird, and it made him and me think of Mothman. So anyways, we go to the swampy area where this guy saw this thing. And we're sitting there, and we're kind of, it's a summer night. So we have the windows down, but you can't keep them down too long because the flies are just awful down in the swampy area. So then we'd roll them up again, but the glare, or we'd fog them up. So we'd have to roll them down again and stuff. And I didn't want the car to be on, to have all this extra noise. So he's looking out his window, and I'm kind of looking out my window, but trying to survey as much of the area as I can. And he goes, hey, I think I see red eyes out here in the swamp. And where he's looking, it's a swampy area, and there's a big tree, and it's got a big branch on it. And he's like, I keep seeing the eyes like right under that branch. And in my opinion, that branch was 10, 11, 12 feet up. Okay.
Yeah.
And he was seeing these eyes there. Also, the Mothman Prophecies trailer, they really point out and make it a point to show big red eyes. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, okay. I've kind of influenced this kid by showing him this trailer. He's focused on the red eyes. He wants to like look good in my eyes. So he's like, hey, yeah, I'm seeing red eyes over here. Check it out. And I'm like, okay, did it just happen? He's like, it's happened like 5 times. And I just wanted to make sure before I brought it to your attention. I'm like, what? Okay. So now I'm watching. He's like, yeah, just watch. You'll see him again. And sure enough, these red eyes open or appear. And then after a second, they go away. I'm like, whoa, I see them. I'm like, buddy, you're right. We're seeing something over there. So we see that a couple more times. It's in a swampy area. I'm not going to go walk over there. I already told you about my insect issues. You know what I mean? I'm not doing that in the middle of the night. And where there's potentially a 10-foot tall, thing out there. So I'm like, that's really cool. Let's make sure I document that. We get back. It's like 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. The kid goes to bed, and I'm kind of like going over like some pictures that I took, and I'm writing down like everything that happened because I didn't want to forget it. And then I finally go to bed. I wake up in the morning, and I go to the area by myself to like check it out. I'm looking around the car and stuff, and I'm not seeing a whole lot of footprints. There's, boot prints or shoe prints or whatever, my car tire prints. There's nothing weird or anything. That swampy area, I'm still not going out there, but I can see the tree, and I can see that it's really tall, and that branch is like 10, 11, 12 feet high. But then I saw something like under the branch during the day. And I'm like, what is that? Where am I in relation to the swamp? Okay. So I'm like, all right, because I could see some houses like way back, like way beyond the tree and stuff. I'm like, I think there's got to be a road over there. So anyways, I take my car and I make my way out there, and it turns out there is a road on the backside of the swamp that kind of, it's a little hilly. It's a hilly area. And I'm wondering if we were seeing brake lights of cars every once in a while, but we couldn't hear anything because the road was so far away, Yeah. And I'm wondering if we saw, the brake lights of cars. But the thing is that they were really consistent looking. Yeah. And not everybody has the same brake lights, you know what I mean? Or the red
or like the same like brake light pattern because people can hold it, not hold it.
Right. And this was circles, and they wouldn't even close. It was just on and then off, Yeah. And it was just really weird. And it seemed mechanical. Mothman has been described as mechanical in some instances, I'm like, that's really interesting. So I couldn't say for sure that we saw the Mothman of Camden, Maine, but we saw something And
Yeah.
it could have been brake lights or it could have been the eyes of a mechanical Mothman. I don't know. But it was cool as hell to like go out there and see it, you know?
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the
You
kid had a
have-
great time.
You have forever changed that kid's life.
Yeah. It's something we still talk about sometimes. It's too bad his mother and I broke up, but he's 18 now, and we still talk once in a while. And he's such a good kid, has such a good cart, and we still talk about that experience sometimes.
That's cool.
Oh,
man.
but yeah, I was going to tell you about elongated time. God, I'm so sorry. I got caught up in the
yeah.
Mothman stuff.
No, you're good.
So on our way back to the hotel, we're driving down the road we just went up, okay? And it's one road out of town. And now we're on the outskirts of town. We're still in the town of Camden, but if we kept going but like another 5 miles, it would be a different town. But it's still on that same stretch of road.
Yeah.
And it was probably 2 miles outside of where the hotel was. You know, we got on that road, had to go 2 miles, and that's where that swampy area is. So we're driving back, and the road's not changing. We're not seeing the town come up. It doesn't take long to go 2 miles. Even if we're in a small town and the speed limit's like, I think it was 35 in the area. Then once you get into town, it's 25.
Yeah.
And it doesn't take long to get back in town. 5 minutes go by. 10 minutes go by, 15 minutes go by. The kid starts getting scared. Like, where are we? I'm like, I don't know. Did we turn or anything? And he's like, no. I'm like, I know. And we kept driving. 20 minutes goes by. 25 minutes goes by.
Dude.
And then we finally start to see the lights of the town. And then the hotel isn't too far from there. It's one of the bigger buildings that's in that area of town. So I'm like, oh, there's the hotel. And we haven't gotten off the road. I'm like, what the hell happened, buddy? And he's like, I don't know, but I was scared. You know, I'm like, I got to tell you, like, you know, I got your back, but I was scared too. You know, like that was weird. And we tried to tell mom about it. And she just, you know, she's a bit of a skeptic. There's probably reasons why it didn't work out. You know what I mean? Lovely person. But, you know, if, you know, you're not into each other's things, that kind of sucks, you know?
Yeah.
Not that you have to like everything, but, you know, some common interests. And she didn't know what to think about that. And I don't blame her because I didn't either. And so it turned into a thing that we just didn't talk about. Although the kiddo and I would talk about it once in a while.
Yeah.
Do you remember when we drove like a half hour and it was 2 miles away? It was a half hour. It was a 2 mile trip that took us a half hour to drive. You know, that was one of the strangest things that's ever happened to me. Since then, that happened in like 2017. Since then, anytime I'm driving and it's like at night, like in general, or I've been on a road that I feel too long, I'm like, look at the clock. All right, capture what time it is. Okay, it's this time. And then I look back like 5 minutes later. I'm like, okay, it's this time. We're cool. There's no missing time. You know?
Start wearing like 15 watches.
Yeah.
Seriously,
But
man.
It was freaky. It was freaky, man.
Yeah, man. Yeah, I saw some videos on that. People talk about that, how they're driving like certain distances and it just keeps going and going and going. It's almost like an eternity where they get some.
Yeah. It felt like we were in some sort of time loop because the road kind of kept looking the same. Because there's this little stretch where you get out of the downtown area of this little small coastal town. You know, it's very touristy and stuff, but then it's just woods on either side. And you drive 5, 6, 7, 8 miles and you get to the next little small town. And it's just woods on either side. And that kind of kept, but we didn't go that far. We were just 2 miles up the road, you know?
Yeah.
And when we left that area, we kept just, and it was just woods on both sides, 25 minutes of that instead of 2 miles of that. Like it, what? You know,
Dude,
it took us
crazy.
like, I think from the hotel, it took like 6 or 7, maybe 8 minutes to get out there, maybe.
Yeah.
You know, so
I'm not gonna lie, I would freaking start panicking too, man. Like,
yeah. But
like,
did you know,
did you
Go
like
ahead, I'm
start
sorry.
speeding up?
I did a few times, but it's a very deer heavy area. So the last thing I wanted to do was like hit a deer or two and be in a time loop. Like, fine, you know, like what am I going to do now? You know, and I didn't even think to check my cell phone. I can't remember if that was working or not.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't remember that because we were just kind of like having a little like panic attack. But this often happens. Like I've had experiences where I think I've seen a ghost And I'm not like, wow, I'm experiencing a ghost right now. I'm kind of like, like, what am I seeing? Like, I think there's something wrong with my vision.
Yeah.
There's been times where I've had a UFO sighting and I'm looking at it and I have all this gear sitting next to me, night vision camera, full spectrum camera and all that stuff. And I'm just sitting there staring at it like an idiot, not doing anything. And I'm a UFO researcher, like you kind of just get caught up in the moment.
Caught up in the moment. Yeah.
And this thing is happening. And I'm like, I have a child with me. What's happening? Just stay cool. You're going to see town any second. So you're just waiting. And then next thing you know, this goes by, that goes by. And then maybe I'm cracking a joke or something to try to get his mind off of stuff,
Yeah.
And so you're just trying to do your best, and I was
Yeah.
like, I didn't know what to do other than to
like-
keep driving.
Yeah. Inside you're going crazy, but you're trying
Yeah.
to play it cool for him,
Yeah. Last thing I want him to do is to feel like super scared. I don't mind showing my feelings to people, but in a situation like that, it's late at night, you're the one in charge, you're the protector in that situation. So I wanted to make sure he was okay, but yeah, he knew something was wrong. He's like, it didn't take this long to get out here. I was like, I know, like, this is weird, man. And
Feels like Groundhog Day.
yeah. It was
thinking.
really it was really weird. Yeah.
Oh man.
I was I forgot to bring this up a while ago, but whenever I mean, I'm going to backtrack quite a bit, but when we talked about MUFON and then a lot of those experiencers, whenever they rebuke these aliens in Jesus' name, they fled. But and then what I was going to say, my story, I didn't see an alien, but it was about 6 o'clock, and here, at least this time of the year, it's dark at 6. And I mean,
was this what happened like a day or two after our conversation? Okay.
And that's what I thought it was. I don't know. It was interesting because I probably wouldn't have done it if I didn't know who we were going to speak with upcoming and stuff like that. And I walked out and I looked up in the sky and I texted Drew right after, and I tried to record it, but it looked like the North Star. It was a bright white light, and I thought it was a plane. I didn't think anything of it, but then I looked up again because I'm like, it just looks like a white light. It's moving. I mean, it was moving fast, but there wasn't any trail or anything behind it. So I could tell it was just like a massive orb in the sky, but it looked like the Northern Light, or a Northern Light. Or wait, no, the North Star, sorry. And I saw a couple planes, and then it went like over a plane and everything. And then just for kicks, and this is where I was just playing with myself. Oh, that sounds weird. This is just where I was just being humorous with myself. And I'm like, no.
You're playing with yourself. All right.
You're right out in the front yard. Hey, neighbors. But when I looked up at that light, I'm like, if you're not of God, then I command you to stop. And I kid you not, it stopped. And then I didn't really freak out. I'm like, huh, because I still had it in my mind. I'm like, well, I don't want to be late to work. But I was walking and then I stumbled on something because I'm just staring up at the sky.
Right.
Because at that point I started getting like a little bit more paranoid. I'm like, man, if I'm late to work, that's gonna be bad. And yeah, before I sat in my car, I looked in my car and then I looked back up once again. It was still there. I haven't seen the light there since, but it was very interesting just how prominent that light was in the sky. I mean, that sucker was freaking bright.
Yeah, and it stopped for you. And I have actually had people that have seen something and they just weren't in the mood today, kind of like that not today Satan type of thing,
Mm-hmm.
and one in particular was with this Mike guy and him having all this lifetime of encounters. Like, it hasn't been fun. Like, this isn't a fun thing for him,
Yeah, he's just
And
over
so, yeah. And he's sick of being scared of the nighttime, So it was a similar thing where he was going to work like wicked early one morning, so it was still dark out. And he's seen an actual UFO. It's not like a light or anything. Like, he's seen a craft. And he's like, we're not doing this tonight. We're not, or, you got to go. Like, this isn't happening. And it, the situation like alleviated itself. I don't know if I don't think he saw it blink out or saw it leave or anything. He was just hands on the steering wheel. He's like, not tonight. We're not doing this tonight. And just kept his head going and just kept driving and would almost ignored it, to leave it alone. And he got to work on time. There was no missing time or anything for him, and so I guess I have heard of that, but, not rebuking in Jesus' name, but just be like, Yo, not tonight, please. I got
I
stuff
think
to do.
it's just so wild, man. Like, I don't know, just with a lot of this stuff, man. The more energy and thought and emotion and I guess spiritual aspect that you give something, it's crazy how it can start to gain more
Manifest.
power. Yeah, and
Well, it's
manifest.
I'm
Yeah,
manifesting it.
I mean, it's just like, I mean, because I'm a believer. I don't know if it's everything, but how there are things like Dogman and Bigfoot, like they have to phase into our reality because they're from. I don't know if it's with all, but I know I've heard of several encounters and talked to people, and and I mean these things literally just appeared. At first, they would look like the Predator in cloak mode, which I think some can cloak, and maybe there might be some truth to that with the Yeti and stuff.
sure.
But then I mean, we talked to a guy, oh crap, Ed Brown. And I told him during the interview, I saw this video online where it was a cloaked Sasquatch. He said, "Oh yeah, that's my girlfriend." I'm like, "What? Sorry, this Bigfoot
Not his girlfriend, but
wasn't his
his
girlfriend,
girlfriend's the one that
but
recorded
yeah,
it.
she recorded it." And I'm like, "Oh man, that's wild. It's a small world." And since
Wow.
then, I'm like, it's so and a cloaked Bigfoot is known as a Glimmerman. I think it's just the Glimmerman is just referring to Bigfoot, and it's very interesting. And I've even seen not in America, but on other streets, like just aliens. They were recorded in the background, and the person taking the picture of their friends didn't even notice them
Oh
either
wow.
whenever
So
they were taking
they
the picture or when they were recording a video. It was walking by, and it's crazy how I mean, it goes into how our eyes work.
Yeah.
Like it's that could because it takes tons and tons of pictures of like a second with our eyes. So that's why it's really good whenever you get it documented by video or photo, you can actually capture that stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because if you're not looking for it, you're more like you're not going to see it. But out in the
Yeah.
woods, it's so wild. But anyway, it's just it's so crazy uh, how this stuff has to manifest into our reality, and I
Yeah.
believe it has to start. This crap has to start eating and becoming a part of this world to be able to live in it.
basically yeah, they have
Yeah,
to if however long these things stay in our dimension, I should say, they have to abide by the rules.
Hmm.
So if something gets caught here, UFO, Bigfoot, whatever, if let's say if they can't go through that portal they came through, interdimensional, whatever, after a while they have to abide by our rules. Gravity, you got to eat, you got to drink water, stuff like that. So it's basically they're basically adapting. You know,
Interesting.
yeah.
Wow. Let me ask you guys something. Have you come across witnesses who have seen both a Bigfoot and a Dogman either at the same time or in the same area but different times?
hmm Yeah, we have. Um, one of the last hunts we went on, her name was Farah. She had like a lot of like Sasquatch activity and some Dogman activity.
Wow. How is she
So
distinguishing them? Is it like different prints or?
basically, she had a footprint, and then she had these things supposedly coming out of the cave, and she also took a photo of one. It looked
Oh
like a
wow.
canine, but it
Wow.
was almost like a shadow creature in between the brush. But you specifically seen the head of it, of the form of like a German Shepherd.
Wow.
yeah. We had one of our friends, and she is ex CIA and stuff. But she
Wow.
has a team of remote viewers, and her and her team viewed this area, and we even had our buddy who was our buddy Nick, who does this stuff. He was like, "Man, you guys shouldn't go. Do not go." But yeah, she was saying there's a whole so much freaking activity there. It wasn't as hot and heavy as we thought it would be. However, in the aspect of cryptids and stuff, however, in the supernatural aspect, there was a lot of stuff that went on there. And we stay away from that paranormal stuff. It's because that stuff can definitely follow you home.
Yeah.
And I'm like, I don't want to bring that home to my wife or my kids.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it's so wild too because while we were there, we actually went over because Farrah and her husband they were looking up at the sky on the other end of her house, and it's probably her house. It was probably like 3/4 of an acre, and it was in a like a little sliver of land, and her cabin was nestled, I guess, closer. Yeah, it was close about 50 feet from the cave, and then you have like almost a steep hill right by her house. So there isn't a lot of land by the house, and then right by her on the other side of her house, it's like a drop off into a creek bed, maybe like 7 feet, 7 to 8 feet down. And yeah, it's like a little island that you stay on. You got to cross like a little bridge, But it was really neat when we were there. But yeah, whenever I went to the back end of the house, I saw and heard her and her husband talking, and I looked up, and then there was like, I'm assuming it was a UFO because it wasn't bright like that North Star light, but it was definitely noticeable, and it was more like a yellowish. I believe it was like a yellowish kind of tint,
Hmm.
but
Yeah.
I didn't see any other blinking colors. But it was really, really high up and far away. Oh, and we also saw that what is that? Starlink?
Starlink.
Yeah,
Oh,
we
yeah.
like we all freeze for a second, then somebody was like, "Oh, that's Starlink." We're like, "Oh gosh, this is it. We're gonna die." It was crazy.
Yeah. What was the trip though? Is that with that expedition we went on? It went from Bigfoot to Dogman to UFOs to Skinwalkers
Wow.
and then paranormal stuff all rolled into one. So we had like a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah, it sounds
yeah.
like Skinwalker Ranch or Gillian's Ranch or something. That's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. That was a trip, man.
That's wild.
Oh yeah, it was something.
Yeah. Other than that, man, yeah. Basically we're hitting like the 2 hour mark, so
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We've been
Yeah.
going for a while. Well, thanks for letting me tell a whole bunch of stories and
oh for sure, man.
share stuff.
Yeah.
There goes Zick again. Oh yeah, yeah. But anyways, man, yeah, we're going to wrap this up. You want to talk a little bit about your book and things
sure,
coming
yeah.
up and all that? And
Yeah.
where people find you at?
So I have a new book coming out this year. It's actually the 10-year anniversary of my first book called UFOs Over Maine. And I completely rewrote the entire book and added an additional like 150 sightings
Yeah.
to the new book. So it's over 400 pages and almost 200 experiences from Mainers. And it includes everything from abductions to Men in Black encounters. I write about the werewolf stuff. There's a whole bunch of stuff in it. And I'm currently raising funds for it. I'm not with a traditional publisher. I typically self-publish. I have been traditionally published, and the first book was traditionally published. And I did that twice, and it was a great experience. I learned a lot from it, but there's no money in it for the author. The publishing house makes the majority, like 95% of the money from the book. So I wanted to start releasing books just by myself. And as times, as you know how times are right now in 2024, everything's super duper expensive. So I have a fundraiser going to raise funds to be able to print that book, because it's really expensive to print books these days. And I've got a few donations now. I think there's 12 or 13 donations right now.
Yeah.
And so I have a GoFundMe, and I can send you the link if you wanted to.
Yes,
put it in any of the
definitely, man.
stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Send us those links, man.
Yeah. So that's going to be out as soon as I can get enough funds to get the first batch out. They'll be out, and I'll be doing some library appearances and some convention appearances this year, and I'll have copies with me. But
Right on.
if you want to check out my podcast, it's called I Want to Believe, and you can search that on anywhere you get your podcast. But if you just do a Google search for Nomar Slevik, it's such a unique name that just all my stuff comes right up, and you can see my books and go to my online store or check out my podcast. And I have a documentary that's out, and it's exclusively streaming right now on Paraflix Paranormal Plus, which is kind of like a subscription service like Netflix, but it's for all things paranormal. And so it's been streaming there. It had a life on Amazon Prime for a few years, and I retired it from there and went exclusive with Paranormal Paraflix. So that's been fun, and you can go there and watch it digitally. So that's basically where you can find me. Just do a Google search for Nomar Slevik, and you'll find all my stuff.
Right on, man. Yeah, man. We'll definitely plug that all in the show notes as well. So
I appreciate
just
it.
later on after the show, just go ahead and send us where all those sites are at, and I'll have them
Yep.
plug it in there.
Cool.
So
Will do.
other than that, no more, man. We appreciate you, dude. Dude, man, good stories, man. Good stuff.
Yeah,
dude.
man, that's rad.
Awesome. Yeah, I had a great time, and thanks so much. Be sure for your audience to check out your appearance on my podcast. It'll be a good time, and it comes out on February 10th.
Right on, man. Cool, man. Yeah, like we said, we're kind of like out of the know when it comes to UFOs and stuff. So we'll be going to you if we got any questions for sure.
I got you back. You just let me know.
Right on, Ski. All right, no more. Appreciate you, brother.
Thanks, guys. Take care.
All right, man. Later.
All right, bye.
Don't end it, Zook.
It's like you saw me go for the button.
I did, man. All right, guys. We actually appreciate you guys coming on and listening. So, Zook, you got anything to say to the people, to the peeps, to the
No,
listeners?
well, just remember to put God first, learn to pray, and just and always do your own research. There's a whole lot in this life we're never going to fully understand, but I do know one thing: God is above all, and He should always come first. And I mean that's definitely what this podcast focus is. But we do focus on cryptids, of course. But yeah, this isn't, as we always end every episode, this isn't really a battle against flesh and blood. Yeah. What about you, Drew?
Yeah, like Zook said in Ephesians 6:12. But yeah, guys, like you said, if you guys got any questions, or you guys got any encounters, or you guys just want to just chit chat and talk, or if you guys got any prayer requests, just hit us up, on cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. That's cryptidwarfare@gmail.com. And I know 2024 is going to be a good year, or it could be a rough year. So, but we just pray and hope that you guys just take it just like one day at a time, and just keep your heads up. So, and just keep pushing. Don't stop, don't quit. Just doesn't matter how life hits you down, just get back up and keep moving. So, but yeah, other than that, yeah, just remember, that Jesus loves you guys, and we really appreciate Nomar coming on, man. He is a plethora of knowledge, and when it comes to the UFO encounters and stuff like that. So, yeah, and if you guys could, Zook's going to be plugging in the show notes, so just go ahead and support him, and also too, yeah, just go check out his podcast, guys. It's I Want to Believe. So yeah, just go ahead and just check out his podcast. And other than that, guys, we just hope you guys have a good, blessed week. And Zook and I are going to be up 5 hours from now, so talking about spiritual warfare. So that's going to be a podcast coming up next. So, all right, guys, like we said, just keep your heads up and keep pushing, and we'll chat with y'all later.
See you guys
Later. Oh yeah. Get it.
Bye.